Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been an avid fisher for years, mostly doing my thing on sandy beaches. I prefer going early in the morning when it's quiet and peaceful. While fishing is perfectly legal on any beach in my country, as long as there are no beach umbrellas around, I always make sure to do it either very early or after sunset out of respect for swimmers. That morning I arrived at around 5:30 a.m. I picked a spot close to the parking lot since I had quite a bit of gear to carry. The beach was massive, about 5 kilometers of pure sand and completely empty. It was absolute bliss, just me, my coffee, the sound of waves, and the sunrise. Perfect fishing conditions. Around 8 a.m. I was reeling in a nice catch when I noticed a car pulling up right next to mine in the massive, empty parking lot. Two older ladies got out and, to my surprise, decided to set up their stuff right next to me. Mind you, this was a completely empty beach, but they chose to sit literally right beside my fishing spot. I smiled at first, thinking they were just curious about my catch. I couldn't have been more wrong. Both ladies were in their swimsuits and started walking straight towards the water, right between my fishing poles. I politely asked them if they could move about 10 meters away to swim, explaining that I was fishing and it might be dangerous for them. The first lady dismissed me, stating they always swim there. I tried to clarify that while they could swim there, they just needed to move slightly left or right of the pole since I was fishing. The second lady became confrontational, telling me that I should be the one to move since they always swim there. I attempted to reason with them, pointing out that I was already set up and the beach was empty, asking if they could just move a bit to either side. The first lady just insisted that I shouldn't be there, claiming it was their swimming spot. They completely ignored me and continued walking into the sea between my poles. Not wanting to cause trouble, I started reeling in one of my lines. Better safe than sorry, even though my hooks were cast about 100 meters out where they couldn't possibly reach. Before I could finish, the first lady, who was knee-deep in water, touched my other fishing line and started screaming like she was being murdered. Both ladies came storming out of the water, yelling that they could have been killed, and threatening to call the police because what I was doing was illegal. And call they did. 10 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. The ladies practically sprinted to them, still yelling. When the officer asked what the problem was, the first lady dramatically claimed that she had almost died because I was fishing while they were swimming. The second lady demanded my arrest, insisting that I had tried to hurt her friend. The officer asked how I had supposedly tried to do that, and the first lady claimed she got tangled in my line and almost drowned. When asked to show where she got tangled, she pointed to her arm, but the officer noted there weren't any marks or signs of struggling. The second lady kept insisting that her friend had almost died and demanded the officer arrest me immediately, claiming it was his job. The officer, after looking around at the empty beach and the screaming ladies who weren't even wet, turned to me for my side of the story. I explained how they had arrived just 20 minutes ago and chose to sit right next to me despite the empty beach, and how I had warned them about the fishing lines but they refused to move. I mentioned that I was actually trying to reel in my lines to avoid any problems when one of them barely touched the line and started screaming. The second lady interrupted, claiming they were there first and I had just arrived to fish. I countered by offering to show all the fish I caught during my 3-hour stay. Then something brilliant happened. The officer walked to the parking lot and touched both car hoods, mine and theirs. He then told them that it was illegal to lie to a police officer and make false accusations. The ladies' faces dropped. The second officer asked why they would do such a thing and asked if I wanted to press charges. I agreed, and they looked mortified as the officers handcuffed them. I was grateful that these officers were so thorough. It could have gone very differently with less competent police. I spent the next few hours at the police station giving my statement. I smelled like fish, and it definitely wasn't the relaxing morning I'd planned, but at least I wasn't the one being arrested. Later, one of their children contacted me, being very apologetic and reasonable. I agreed to drop the charges, but the incident still went on their record. I doubt they'll try pulling something like this again after such a humiliating experience. Best of all, I heard that they've been banned from that beach for the rest of the season. I've been a police officer for some years now, working in a mid-sized town where everyone seems to know everyone. Started right after graduating from the police academy at 23, fresh-faced and eager to make a difference. My parents weren't thrilled about my career choice. They wanted me to take over the family restaurant, but I knew deep down that serving and protecting was my calling. Night shifts were always my preference. There's something peaceful about patrolling the quiet streets while most people are asleep. Less traffic, less chaos, and usually just the occasional drunk driver or minor disturbance to deal with. It was around 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, or Sunday morning if you want to be technical. I was parked near one of our town's busiest intersections, known for late-night traffic violations. That's when I saw a silver BMW blast through a red light like it wasn't even there. I turned on my lights and sirens and the car pulled over after about half a mile. When I approached the vehicle, I immediately recognized the driver, the sheriff's daughter. She was hanging out the window before I even reached her car. She immediately started yelling, demanding to know if I knew who she was. I calmly asked for her license and registration, but she just kept screaming. She threatened that her daddy would have my badge for this and insisted that I couldn't pull her over. The smell of alcohol hit me like a wall. Her words were slurred and her eyes were glazed over. Great. Just great. I asked her to step out of the vehicle, but she refused, demanding that I call her dad right away. I had to repeat my request more firmly, telling her she needed to step out immediately. She stumbled out, nearly falling face first onto the pavement. I helped steady her and guided her to the rear of her vehicle. The whole time she wouldn't shut up about being the sheriff's daughter, as if I didn't already know who she was. I explained that I was going to conduct some field sobriety tests, telling her she needed to follow the movement of my pen with her eyes only. I reached for my pen and stepped closer to begin the test. That's when everything went sideways. Without warning, her fist connected with my face. I heard a sickening crunch, and suddenly I was on the ground, blood pouring from my nose. Who knew this 5'0" girl could throw a punch like Mike Tyson? Through the haze of pain, I managed to hit my panic button. Within minutes, the quiet street turned into a circus of flashing lights and sirens. 3 patrol cars screeched to a halt around us, and my fellow officers had her in cuffs before she could take another swing. At the jail, everyone was fussing over my broken nose while she screamed from the holding cell. The paramedics wanted to take me to the hospital, but I refused to leave until everything was properly documented. My supervisors kept trying to get me to focus on my injury, but I was more concerned about making sure she couldn't wriggle out of this one. Then the sheriff arrived. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in one night. He spoke with my lieutenant and sergeant first, then with the responding officers. Finally, he went to see his daughter in the holding cell. I couldn't hear what was said, but the shouting was audible through the walls. When he approached me, I tried to stand at attention, but he waved me back down. He asked about my condition, his voice heavy with concern. I tried to downplay it, telling him it was just a broken nose and I'd live. He apologized profusely, calling his daughter's behavior unacceptable. When I tried to tell him it wasn't his fault, he cut me off. He said she was his responsibility, then gave me a direct order. He told me I had to charge her with underage consumption, operating while intoxicated, assault on an officer causing injury, and resisting arrest. Then he added that if I didn't do it right away, he'd have my badge. Before I could respond, he turned and stormed out, leaving everyone in stunned silence. The story could have ended there, but the sheriff wasn't done. After she got her plea deal, 2 days in jail, a hefty fine, and a 6-month license suspension, he arranged something special. He gathered the entire patrol division and corrections department together. That's over 160 officers, and made her stand in front of everyone to apologize. She stood there trembling as every single officer stared her down. No daddy's girl attitude now. No more entitled princess. Her voice shaking, she delivered her apology. She admitted her behavior was inexcusable, acknowledged she had assaulted an officer who was just doing his job, and expressed how she had brought shame to her father and the department. She promised nothing like this would ever happen again. The sheriff stood behind her the whole time, hands clasped behind his back, face stern as stone. After her apology, he added one final twist. She would spend her summer volunteering at the department, filing paperwork and cleaning patrol cars. Nothing builds character quite like washing police cruisers under the hot summer sun. I gained a whole new level of respect for the sheriff that night. It couldn't have been easy to watch his daughter face those consequences, but he chose to be a leader first and a father second. As for me, my nose healed just fine, though it's a bit crooked now. I like to think of it as a reminder that justice doesn't care who your daddy is. After graduating with a business degree and finding the corporate world wasn't for me, I decided to take a different path. The cannabis industry was booming in our state, and with my retail experience and knowledge of business operations, I landed a job at one of the most upscale dispensaries in the city. We weren't your average shop. We carried premium products and had a reputation for exceptional service. It was just another summer afternoon, and I was working the counter with my co-worker. The store was quiet, and we were catching up on inventory when this taxi pulled up outside. Through our floor-to-ceiling windows, we watched as this woman stepped out, looking like she'd just teleported straight from some underground rave. She was wearing these ridiculous white faux fur leg warmers, despite it being the middle of summer, and was dragging a rolling suitcase behind her. My co-worker went to greet her at the door and asked for her ID, standard procedure that we follow religiously. We have signs everywhere explaining this requirement. It's not just company policy, it's state law. We have to check IDs every single time someone enters, even if they were just here 5 minutes ago. The woman walked up to the counter with the confidence of someone who was about to make everyone's day difficult. She immediately started claiming that she had been here yesterday with her friend and had bought a 2-pack for $5, demanding the same deal today. My co-worker, always professional, calmly explained that we didn't have any 2-packs at that price, but offered to show her other products within that price range. The woman's face turned red faster than a traffic light. She started yelling about how she had just bought it yesterday and accused us of trying to rip her off. My co-worker explained that our closest 2-pack was $5.50, which was the lowest price we offered. The woman became even more agitated, demanding to know if we were really going to fight her over 50 cents. She called it ridiculous and demanded to speak to whoever was in charge. My co-worker, who'd had enough of this woman's attitude, asked her to leave. Instead of leaving, she went outside, dramatically plopped down on her suitcase in the parking lot, and sat there staring at us through the windows like a jilted ex. About 10 minutes later, she stormed back in, this time without her luggage, holding up her phone and recording us. She started demanding our first and last names, threatening to report all of us. That's when my manager stepped in, cool as ever. He asked to see her ID, to which she protested that she had already shown it earlier. The manager explained that she needed to show ID every time she entered the store and asked where her ID was. She stammered that it was in her wallet outside. The manager then told her she needed to stop filming and leave immediately, explaining that she couldn't be in the store without showing ID. She started arguing that this was public property and she had the right to film us. The manager corrected her, stating this was private property. When she insisted it was open to the public, the manager had to explain that it literally wasn't, that you must be over 21 and show legal ID, or you're breaking several laws by being in the building. She threatened to call the police, to which my manager calmly pointed out that we had footage from our 4 security cameras showing her harassing our employees and remaining in the building illegally without ID. He suggested the police would be very interested in seeing that footage. The color drained from her face. She stormed out, but her dramatic exit was somewhat ruined by the fact that she had to sit on her suitcase in the parking lot for another 20 minutes, waiting for a taxi. To make matters even better, it started raining. Just a light drizzle, but enough to make her fur leg warmers look like drowned rats. When she finally climbed into her taxi, my manager turned to us with a grin and reminded us that this was exactly why we have a sign saying "No filming allowed" right next to all our ID requirement signs. We later found out through another customer that she'd been going around to different dispensaries in the area trying to scam them with the same story about the $5 two-pack. Apparently, we weren't the first to kick her out, just the first to make her wait in the rain. I've been in the entertainment industry for quite a while now, but this story takes me back to my early days when I was just starting out. I was primarily a sound engineer, but when an opportunity came up to work on stage electronics and spotlights for a major theater production in the city's entertainment district, I jumped at the chance. As they say, when you're young in this industry, you take whatever experience you can get. For about 6 weeks, I worked on setting up the production, hanging lights, running cables, installing equipment, you name it. During this time, I also helped out the sound crew with their setup, which led to me becoming good friends with 2 of the sound technicians. After the show opened, some of us who worked on the electronics managed to pick up extra work helping the permanent theater staff replace burnt-out lights throughout the building. It wasn't glamorous work, but the extra money was nice. This meant I was often in the theater well before showtime. One evening, I was hanging out at the sound desk with the 2 sound technicians before the show. They had an arrangement where one would operate the main soundboard, while the other would handle tasks like distributing microphones to the actors and dealing with any technical issues during the show. They'd switch roles daily to keep things fair. When the 30-minute call before showtime was announced, one of the sound techs went backstage to hand out the wireless microphones to the cast. About 10 minutes later, he came back looking really upset. The first sound tech asked his colleague what was wrong. The second tech, still visibly shaken, explained that the lead actor had just completely humiliated him over absolutely nothing. He described how the actor had started yelling at him about some minor issue with his microphone from yesterday's show. I should mention that this one actor had a reputation for being incredibly arrogant and treated the crew like dirt. Everyone backstage couldn't stand him, but we had to put up with his attitude. The first sound tech's response was quiet but intense, asking in a dark tone if that's what had really happened. I watched as his face darkened. The audience was starting to file in, creating that pre-show buzz of conversation. He put on his headphones and started fiddling with the soundboard. Suddenly, a mischievous grin spread across his face. He told us to take a listen to what he'd found, passing the headphones first to his colleague, whose frown quickly turned into a gleeful smile. Then they passed the headphones to me. What I heard was, well, let's just say, our entitled actor had chosen that moment to use the bathroom, and his wireless microphone was picking up every grunt, groan, and embarrassing sound in vivid detail. Sound Tech 1 had cleverly turned up the actor's channel just enough that these sounds were barely audible in the theater. I looked around and noticed several audience members looking around in confusion, trying to identify the strange sounds. But that wasn't even the best part. I had to head backstage to my position for the first act, and when I got there, I discovered something hilarious. The theater had a system of speakers throughout the backstage area so the cast and crew could hear what was happening during the show. Due to how this system was set up, what was barely audible in the theater was coming through loud and clear backstage. The entire cast and crew were treated to a full surround sound experience of our entitled actor's bathroom visit. The only place in the entire theater that didn't have these speakers was the bathroom itself, so we had no idea what was happening. For the rest of the show, every time this actor walked past anyone backstage, they'd burst into poorly suppressed giggles. He kept getting more and more frustrated, unable to figure out why everyone was laughing at him. His usual smug expression was replaced with confusion and irritation. During the curtain call, when he did his usual overly dramatic bow, someone in the crew area made a trumpeting sound, causing several cast members to nearly lose it right there on stage. He never did figure out why everyone was giggling that night, but he was noticeably less arrogant toward the crew after that. I heard later that the sound technicians made copies of the audio incident and kept them as insurance against future bad behavior. They never needed to use them. Word had spread And while the actor didn't know exactly what happened, he knew something had occurred that made him look foolish. From then on, he was much more careful about how he treated the crew. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.